Now I'm thrilled to introduce the moderator for our first session, Who's Doing What Where? An illustrative update from institutions focused on planetary health around the world, which will paint the scene of the enormous penetration of the planetary health concept. Our moderator, Dr. Liz Grant, is Assistant Principal for Global Health at the University of Edinburgh and Director of one of the university's 5 global academies, which together focus on the intersection of global health, justice, environment, development, and food security. She is Director of the Zambia UK Health Workforce Alliance and a co-director of the University of Edinburgh's Global Compassionate Initiative. Let's welcome Dr. Liz Grant.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and it's wonderful to have this first session to start off thinking about, as you say, the penetration of planetary health for such a time as this. I think that's a message that we're going to take away these next few days. For such a time as this, planetary health is needed, a movement. Almost 100 years ago, W.B. Yeats, an Irish poet, was writing in a poem, and you'll know the words, or you know some of it. Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. And in a way, our message this morning has already been that. This is a time of urgency because things are falling apart. The centre's not holding, and we can't, but there's things we can do. We have an extraordinary opportunity, a generation which needs to make change, a generation which can make change. And in this session and in these next few sessions, we're going to be looking at what is the narrative that we're carrying, the narrative of the past, the narrative of the evidence base, but the narrative that lies in the culture and the arts and traditions that tells us how to take forward what we know already, that the earth is being broken, but we can respond, we can make things different. And our human health depends on the health of the world around us, our planet. We're going to listen and hear about skills and tools of the present that we want to use. And this is a conversation time. This day and a half is a time and sessions just to talk to each other as well, to talk with the presenters, to believe that there's things we can do. And it's a time about shaping the future. We are going to shape the future because the message here, though things are falling apart, is that there is hope. Hope from last night's talks, hope from this morning. Hope because lying behind this multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary work is a sense of vocation, that actually, regardless of the discipline, it's the vocation behind it that's going to make things change. We need change makers. Our generation is going to be the change makers, these students who we're going to hear about from the courses that are developed. But the change makers need to be able to influence the choice makers. All of us need to be able to influence the choice makers, because we need planetary health to become a movement that moves from the wellness to the wholeness of the earth, and we can do that. Planetary health is very much about responding to the unintended consequences of a whole series of drivers that pushed our economies, that made us wealthy and successful, but drivers that were unintended, and drivers some that were hidden, as we know that people were changing. There was a drivers of greed. But maybe the commitment, and we're going to hear this now, the commitment is really to commit to the intentional and the remarkable consequences of synergistic work together. We commit to that, things can change. So I'm going to call our first speaker, Jen, to come up. Jen Meredith is doing an extraordinary piece of work in Cornell University, bringing together this cross-campus work, transdisciplinary work in a Masters of Public Health that has and Masters of Public Health that's got planetary health, and I'm sure primary health and public health at its core. Jen spent quite a few years working in different organisations with CDC and PEPFAR and USAID, working across disciplinary boundaries and looking at data, public health leadership, management, informatics, working in the Caribbean and Sub-Saharan Africa. Jen, it's a pleasure to welcome you here today. So thank you for this first part where you're going to describe the different structures and places for teaching across universities.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Liz, for that warm welcome. I'm really, truly honored to be here among all of you who are here to lead change. I have the pleasure over the next few minutes to talk about what universities around the world are doing to help advance planetary health. So back in 2015, this seminal report was released by The Lancet, summarizing the collective work of 22 thought leaders representing top global institutions. We in this room were likely among the first to take notice and to start spreading the word. Personally, this is something that caught my eye. It's time for a new discipline. And this caught my eye because it aligned directly with work that we were initiating at my own institution. With the release of the Commission's report and the ensuing dialogue around institutionalization and adoption, fantastic talking points and infographics became available to help guide action. We've been able to understand the critical need for this new discipline. We've gotten ideas about what we need to do, and we've all felt that there's a need for urgent action. And then The Lancet brought it all together. From my vantage point, this is one of the strongest advocacy tools to support a call to action, especially within academia. Researchers, funders, and organizers can see their individual leadership role within the field, but also the collaborations they must foster to achieve success in planetary health. To borrow words from this Lancet infographic, planetary health brings together a wide range of existing disciplines to ensure a healthy and sustainable future. So by my count, we're about 21 months post-launch of this new field of impact-focused research and practice. And there are no fewer than 40 academic institutions taking an active role in developing the research base and training our future leaders. It all started with a few clusters in the US, the UK, Asia, and Africa, led in large part by the Planetary Health Commissioners. From there, the epidemic spread. In 21 short months, institutions in the Americas, Africa, Europe, and Asia are talking, teaching, researching, and practicing in the field of planetary health. Hopefully you all see yourselves there. We could, I'm sure, spend the whole weekend talking about what each of these institutions is doing, but I have only 5 minutes. Looking across all of these institutions, I see 5 leadership themes at play. Universities bringing planetary health to the world stage through speaking and publications. Universities engaging in high-impact, outcome-focused research that shows the value of planetary health. Universities teaching planetary health to current and future leaders both in the classroom and in the field. Universities fostering transdisciplinary, cross-sector collaborations, and universities finding ways to demonstrate need while also showing proven solutions that can be scaled for impact and can guide policy decisions. I'm going to try to highlight these themes with a few examples from just a few partner universities. So first we'll go across the globe, around the globe, to Australia. So the University of Sydney is known for supporting cross-university collaboration for applied research. Following release of the Planetary Health Report, the university took action and developed the first named professorship in planetary health. Dr. Tony Capon, Planetary Health Commissioner, has taken this post and is working across the university to help build a sustainable future. Specifically, the university seeks to ensure that planetary health is core to all the university does, including transdisciplinary education at all levels of training, transdisciplinary and impact-focused research, and a commitment to being a lead voice on planetary health in the Southeast Asia and Asia-Pacific region, a part of the world where rising sea levels, water pollution, food security, and rapidly growing cities are clear and present concerns. Across the Indian Ocean, in Africa, another planetary health commissioner, Dr. Alex Azza, is leading action in this part of the world, where inequity is prevalent, profound demographic changes are underway, and development is happening at such a pace where if we don't act soon, we might lose too much. Working through the African Population Health and Research Center, Dr. Azza helped to set up the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa. CARTA is made up of 9 universities across Africa, including in Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Malawi, and Rwanda. The Pan-African Consortium funds fellowships for doctoral students and postdocs working in planetary health issues in Africa and has led the change in bringing planetary health to the table with government, policymakers, funders, and non-governmental organizations. Although not dedicated only to planetary health, CARTA has a network of 450 university faculty and staff who are committed to African-led multidisciplinary research that has impact on population and public health. This network is currently mentoring some 200 PhD students and postdocs. Moving north up to the UK, there's much happening there to make planetary health ubiquitous and accessible. Jeff Sims, these are my older slides, I'm sorry. Jeff Sims and Liz Grant, through the Global Academies at the University of Edinburgh, are leading a suite of interconnected transdisciplinary online master's programs that focus on core elements of planetary health. Sorry, there was a slide missing. Most recently, at the University of Edinburgh, the Commonwealth Commission has offered up support to help them extend this work by developing a planetary health summer school run between Edinburgh, the University of Rwanda, and Makerere University in Uganda, who are both CARTA members. Also in the UK, Sir Andy Haynes, chair of the Rockefeller Lancet Commission, has been a prominent voice in helping to surface the urgency of planetary health, including with the United Nations leadership and government ministries globally. At the same time, he and colleagues at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine have been able to actively engage cross-sector faculty and doctoral students to lead applied planetary health research. Current projects are focused on urban environments in health, global food systems in health, and environmental change in health. This work is contributing to a literature base, helping us to understand how to bring solutions to scale for impact. Moving across the Atlantic now, but maintaining a global focus, Harvard University, the World Federation of Academic Institutions for Global Health, and the Planetary Health Alliance have been working to make education on planetary health accessible to all. This partnership, led by Sam Myers, Chris Golden, and Amalia Almada, is looking to build from existing curricula, such as the undergraduate course that they're currently teaching here at Harvard, led by planetary health leaders. They're also looking to leverage available web-based education platforms and regional hubs of expertise to bring planetary health education to the world. I think many of us in this room have or will contribute curriculum, and thank you for that. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about what we're doing at Cornell University, nestled at the southern tip of one of these Finger Lakes. With the support of university leadership and partners, Cornell is making good on its land-grant mission by putting planetary health into action. Some years ago, Cornell made a huge commitment to multidisciplinary approaches to sustainability and created a cross-campus Atkinson Center for a Sustainable Future. This center, which is made up of 500 faculty representing every department and college on campus, is allowing us to break out of our silos to work together for real impact. Leveraging our academic resources in environmental and agricultural health, plant and animal health, human and public health, and in business, technology, leadership, and human behavior, Cornell hopes to be working hand in glove with all of you to help lead this change. Some of the most notable initiatives that Cornell has underway are cross-college faculty appointments with a specific mandate for transdisciplinary innovation for impact, a new MPH program that focuses specifically on planetary health, taught from a systems approach with faculty from multiple colleges, applied field-based curriculum for undergraduates and graduate students so the students can learn from and with the planet, and an innovation fund for cross-sector, impact-focused research, specifically in the field of planetary health, with doctoral and postdoctoral funding in the same areas. We also have planetary health commissioners, Dr. Steve Osofsky and Dr. Montira Ponsiri on faculty, and they're helping to lead science policy work as co-founding partners of the Planetary Health Alliance. In closing, I want to specifically mention key academic partners who are also leading work via amazing networks of institutions in Asia and South America, including the United Nations University in Japan, Thammasat University in Thailand, Tsinghua University in China, and the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil. I apologize if this slide doesn't give credit to all where credit is due, and I really apologize that I wasn't able to highlight the work that many of your institutions are also doing. Hopefully next year, we can advocate for more than 8 minutes to talk about this work, and I thank you, and I move forward in partnership with you all.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was just a wonderful cut across the whole of the world with capturing some of the things that are happening. Now, I'm going to introduce another amazing woman, Sarah Stone. Sarah is working with the Planetary Health Alliance, and Sarah is a Planetary Health Education Fellow there. And she's done extraordinary work, picking up what you were saying, Jen, just bringing together those educational resources. Sarah also is the Director of Education and Training for Global Health SIM, which is an innovative open access resource for global health teaching. And I want to just mention one thing. Sarah was honoured for her outstanding support and leadership in CDC's response to the Ebola epidemic in West Africa by the National Centre for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases. So congratulations, Sarah, for that. And we look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Liz. Let's see, where's this? Right. So Jen has spoken a little bit about the amazing progress that we're seeing institutions make in this emerging field of planetary health. And this is a really foundational step for the field and for educating the next generation of scholars. So I'm going to move into kind of the modern tools and platforms that we have at our disposal to give you all a sense of where this is going. So we're now in an unprecedented era of global connectivity. We're seeing the landscape of traditional brick and mortar education shift a little bit. As of January 2017, over 3.5 billion people were accessing the internet, which is over half of the global population. And yes, this access is different across different regions. So you see,
So sorry, Sarah.
sorry, I'll move down. I have a good idea. Okay. So, okay, good. Can you hear me better now? Okay, great. Sorry about that. So yes, these numbers vary across regions, and you're seeing greater access in North America and Western Europe. But the really amazing thing here is the exponential pace of change that we're seeing. So in 2016 alone, an additional 10% of these people got online, which means over 350 million more people are accessing the internet in the last year. And in 2017, nearly 75% of these people are accessing via their smartphones. So now when you're in school or when you have a question, you can find the answers literally at your fingertips. Many of you may remember your teachers in primary school saying you had to memorize the multiplication times tables because you wouldn't always have a calculator with you. But this is no longer the case. So learning is happening a little differently with these tech tools. And while traditional education is becoming more expensive and more competitive, online access and the advent of Creative Commons licensing, which allows for work to be freely shared and cited, means that the knowledge that was once imparted to a limited few is now accessible to anybody with an internet connection. And this is by no means a replacement for the in-person learning, but it does provide a space for institutions to move into and for startups of all kinds to leverage to provide this education access to millions of people who would not otherwise have access to it. And as planetary health emerges, we're well poised to move right into this space. So we're seeing institutions like the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and the University of Edinburgh offering remote courses and degrees at the postgraduate level in planetary health-related topics. And you can enroll in these courses from anywhere in the world as long as you have internet. So the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine calls these distance learning courses and degrees, and they offer them in topics like demography and health and environmental epidemiology. And the University of Edinburgh offers a part-time online degree called a Global Challenges degree that takes a multidisciplinary approach to understanding health, environment, and development-related challenges. And students register for these courses from across the globe, and they have a wide variety of disciplinary backgrounds, and many of them are concurrently working in NGOs and other agencies right at this intersection of health and the environment and development-related challenges. And we're also seeing accredited master's level courses beginning to being offered online for free from online-only institutions like NextGenU on topics like environmental health and conflict and health. And the people taking these courses are students and practitioners from high-income countries who are looking for some supplemental learning, as well as students and practitioners from low- and middle-income countries who are looking for training in subjects that they would not otherwise have access to. And we're seeing a boom in the massive open online courses, or MOOCs, rather than full degrees, which are offered in hundreds of languages, and they're tackling much of the content within the planetary health umbrella, like nutrition and health, and sustainable development and health. And about a third of the students who enroll in some of these courses are from low and middle income countries, but that number is growing as global access to the internet grows. So with so many options for hosting online courses, it provides this really exciting space that planetary health can expand into. And we're looking forward to seeing some of these courses being titled explicitly as planetary health in the coming months and years. And further innovations are now stepping on the scene to take this online content and make it accessible offline or in low bandwidth settings. So groups like Calibri have developed mechanisms so you can share content from device to device regardless of internet connectivity. And right at the beginning, I mentioned that about 75% of all internet users, about 2.7 billion people, are accessing via their smartphones. But an additional 2.2 billion people have basic mobile phones, which nearly doubles the population who has access to this education. So in addition to the content for students, educators around the world now have this unprecedented opportunity to share their teaching resources and to see those of others to reduce the duplication of efforts. The University of Plymouth in the UK has developed and is launching, actually on Tuesday, May 2nd, the Nurses Toolkit, which is an online collection of resources specifically for nurses and other health professionals so they can embed content into their courses that explores these connections between climate change, sustainability, and health. And as Jen briefly mentioned, we at the Planetary Health Alliance are working to harness this global community of educators as well, and working to build this emerging field together. So we've developed an online platform. It's a website for a curated collection of educational resources targeted at educators at the undergraduate level working to teach planetary health. Our beta site is now live through our website, which is very exciting. And this platform provides free open source access to the multimodal content like podcasts, TED Talks, and classroom activities, anything you can think of that would support an educator in teaching planetary health, as well as sample syllabi so you can see how others are working to teach this around the world. And we're looking to develop case studies now, looking at events like episodes of haze in Southeast Asia, or agricultural innovation in dam building and the burden of disease of schistosomiasis in West Africa. And these resources can all be used to supplement an existing syllabus or to infuse an existing course with planetary health content, or they can be coupled together to create a planetary health course from scratch. So the process of collecting and collating these existing teaching resources serves as a key component in this building of a community that you've heard mentioned a few times this morning. And it's our hope that this platform will engage you all, but also the global community of educators, and they will actively contribute their own teaching materials to this site to build out this global good for planetary health education. And in addition, as the beta site is tried and tested, we're also planning to expand the content to the postgraduate level and are thinking about how this can fit into medical school and nursing school education, as well as how we can branch out into other professional schools, like schools of architecture, to work with professors for urban planning and design. And by engaging with and supporting the sharing of resources, we're working to leverage the existing breadth and depth of knowledge around planetary health that already exists. And really importantly, we see the creation of this educational content for planetary health to be a global effort. It's not a top-down approach. And the development of this platform really highlights that. It's a platform for global contributions. It's not a teaching directive. And to further educational engagement from across the world, the Planetary Health Alliance is also entering into partnership with the World Federation of Academic Institutions for Global Health and working to develop a plan to launch pilot sites in low and middle income countries so that they can work to develop the content and the courses at a local level to ensure that the content is really being driven by those who will be using it. So to achieve what we are striving to achieve in planetary health and in planetary health education specifically, we need to utilize all of these innovations and collaborate with all of these players. The accessibility that they provide is core in addressing the cross-cutting approaches and building the skills we need to address planetary health challenges. The accessibility is enabling this local to global and global to local transfer of knowledge. And it's this accessibility that is pushing planetary health education to break down disciplinary and geographic silos. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker for this session, and then we're going to have some questions and discussion points, is Professor Phil Landringham. Professor Phil, please come through. Many of you will know Professor Landringham. He's famous as Professor of Environmental Medicine, Paediatrics at the Dean for Global Health at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine. But also, Phil, you've been involved in chairing a number of committees at the National Academy of Science, looking at children who were uniquely vulnerable to pesticides. That was part of your extraordinary work. And also, currently, you chair the Lancet Mount Sinai Global Commission on Pollution and Health. And Phil is going to talk to us about the powers of commission and the global nature of commission and how we can take things forward and the action that pushes from there. So thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Liz, Mike, Dean Williams, Mike Myers, Sam. It's good to be back home in Boston. So what I will talk with you about this morning is the power of Lancet commissions to move the world forward. First, I have to move the slide forward. So I'm going to talk briefly about the Lancet Commission on Pollution and Health, which for the past 2 years I've had the privilege to co-chair with Richard Fuller, who's the executive director of an NGO called Pure Earth, based in New York City. The way this commission came to be was that just under 2 years ago, in July of 2015, at the Rockefeller Foundation in Washington, on the day of the rollout of the Commission on Planetary Health, the Rockefeller Lancet Commission on Planetary Health, I went up to Richard Horton, the editor of the Lancet, and said to him, Richard, the Planetary Health Commission has done marvelous work. The Climate Change Commission a few months earlier had done marvelous work, but neither one of them made more than passing mention to the topic of pollution. And he said, yes, we need to have a commission on pollution. So there, in about the span of 2 seconds, was born the Commission on Pollution and Health. And we're proud to be part of a long list of Lancet commissions whom Richard Horton has brought together. And the common themes that unite these commissions are that they focus on big issues. They're inherently multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and their role is much more than simply to bring people together and to produce a report which goes on your bookshelf. We do that, of course, but beyond that, the role of these commissions is to bring attention to a problem that needs attention, and even more important than bringing attention, it's to catalyze action. And so we're in hopes that our Commission on Pollution and Health will follow in that noble tradition and do just that. These are our aims: to raise awareness and end neglect of the diseases caused by pollution. We define pollution quite simply as anything that people put into the environment that damages either human health or ecosystems. We defined pollution very broadly to include all of the above: air, water, chemicals, and lead. I'm going quickly because Liz has me to a strict timer. So let me put pollution in perspective in relation to other major causes of disease and death. Ebola, terribly important in West Africa. Sarah, thank you for your work on Ebola. War, murder, violence, road accidents, malnutrition, drugs and alcohol, AIDS, malaria, TB together kill about 3 million people per year. And I should point out that the fact that AIDS, malaria, and TB kill only 3 million is an extraordinary human triumph, because a decade ago it was 6 million. Imagine the amount of work that's been put in by people around the world to reduce those scourges by 50% in a decade. Salt, tobacco kills 7 million per year. And finally, pollution in all its forms kills 9 million per year. About 2/3 of that is air, 1/3 is water, and the rest is chemicals and soil pollution. So pollution is changing. It's getting worse in many respects, and it's certainly killing more people. And the big drivers are urbanization, the fact that more than half the world's population now lives in cities, and that percentage is going up year to year. The growth of cars, industrialization, and the relocation of toxic industries, pesticide manufacture, chemical manufacture, asbestos use to the developing countries of the world. One of the central graphs in our Commission report is this one. It shows that the traditional forms of pollution, defined as household air pollution and water pollution, are going down. That is to say, the number of deaths caused by those forms of pollution are going down. But by contrast, the number of deaths caused by ambient air pollution, soil pollution, chemical pollution are going up. And one projection is that the number of deaths caused by ambient air pollution will increase by another 50% by the year 2050 in the absence of very aggressive intervention. Here, the second big point is that the majority, more than 70%, of the diseases caused by pollution are non-communicable diseases. Pollution, for example, accounts for 25% of heart disease, 25% of stroke, 40% of chronic obstructive lung disease, 35–40% of all cancers. And yet, despite that enormous impact of pollution on non-communicable diseases, the global plan for the control of and prevention of non-communicable diseases does not mention pollution. I don't know what they were thinking. It's all about tobacco, diet, exercise, all of which I approve. Well, some I approve, others I disapprove. But not a word about, well, one short paragraph, but nothing in the action plan about pollution. I don't know where they were. Chemical manufacture. We saw that family of slides that Howie put up earlier this morning that came from the planetary report. Chemical production is among the trends going in the wrong direction. Chemical production has skyrocketed. Today, 2/3 of chemical manufacture takes place in low and middle income countries. Rate of growth is 3.4% per year with no end in sight. The variety of chemicals that has produced is mind-boggling. The U.S. EPA says 80,000. OECD says 140,000. Whatever the exact number is, the basic problem is that most of them have never been tested. We've operated in the blind belief that new chemicals will bring benefits, and it's only after the fact, time and time again, starting with lead and asbestos, and more recently with PCBs and phthalates and brominated flame retardants, that we've learned that new chemicals cause damage, cause harm, and then we end up trying to clean up the mess after the fact. Children are among those who suffer most grievously from pollution of all forms, air, water, and chemicals, because they're more heavily exposed and because they're going through the incredibly complex, highly choreographed, tightly scripted processes of early development. Those stages, because of their great complexity, are very, very easily disrupted, and even very tiny levels of exposure to pollution in the early vulnerable stages of life can cause lasting damage that extends over the decades, not just to cause disease in childhood, but to lay the seeds for heart disease, stroke, cancer, dementia, out into the 7th and 8th decade. Here are some of the emerging chemicals that we don't yet know what quantitative contribution any of these make to the global burden of disease. They're not captured by the GBD because the data to permit their capture don't yet exist, but they're out there, they're widely dispersed. CDC, in their rolling annual surveys, detects all of these materials in the blood and urine of all of us in this room, and yet we don't know their complete contribution to disease. Big connections between pollution and climate change. They both come from the same source. Fuel combustion is the biggest source of both. Coal is the worst of all. Coal produces more greenhouse gases and more pollution than oil or gas or anything else. But the good news about pollution, if there is any good news, is that, and the good news about climate change, is that the solution to one will be the solution to the other. If you cap one, you can control the other. If we switch to cleaner fuels, we can control pollution. This guy understands very clearly the connection between pollution, climate change, poverty, inequity. Pollution is totally a human rights issue. 92% of the deaths due to pollution occur in the world's poor countries, in every country, including the United States. Think, for example, Chemical Alley on the Mississippi River. Think Roxbury, think Harlem. It's people in poor communities who suffer disproportionately, and within those communities it's the women and the kids and the elderly who suffer the most. This is the same information graphically. My predecessor at Mount Sinai, Irving Selikoff, used to say that statistics are people with the tears wiped off. Pollution is very costly. Mike Myers challenged us in his remarks this morning to link in economics, and for that reason we've had a whole team of economists on the Lancet Commission on Pollution and Health, led by the late Kenneth Arrow of Stanford, looking at the costs, the economic costs of pollution. Why is this necessary? Why does a pediatrician have to worry about the cost of disease? We're supposed to think about sick kids. Well, I've learned the hard way that when I go to Albany and when I go to Washington, if I don't tell the politicians that disease costs money, they'll thank me for my appearance and let me depart quietly. You've got to show them that disease costs money if you want to affect change. And so we've tried to do that in this report. We've looked at the impact of pollution on productivity, which is the costs that result when people are taken out of the workforce by illness or premature death. And we've looked at the costs of illness themselves, which, especially in rapidly industrializing low and middle income countries, can be massive. And the economists have done their magic and done the so-called willingness to pay methodology and calculated the costs of pollution-related disease of $4.5 trillion per year, which is 6% of global economic output. And we didn't even get into the costs of environmental degradation, which we know are very great indeed. Pollution control can yield great benefits. I was involved in the 1970s in the effort to get lead out of gasoline in this country. We saw blood lead levels decline in American children by more than 90%, and that decline in blood lead resulted in a 5-point increase in the average IQ of all American children, which is why my grandchildren are much brighter than I am. And it resulted also in a huge economic benefit for this country, because we have 4 million babies born in this country per year. Give them each 5 IQ points, so that's 20 million new IQ points per year. An IQ point is worth $10 million to a person over their lifetime in terms of their earning capability. Multiply that out, as Joel Schwartz at Harvard did a few years ago, and that's $200 billion given back to the American economy each and every year since 1980, an aggregate benefit of $6 trillion from the one action of getting lead out of gasoline. Single action. Now been replicated in virtually all countries around the world. This is a great little graph that was in the New England Journal of Medicine a couple of weeks ago, an article by John Samet, Tom Burke, and Bernie Goldstein, showing that in this country, pollution, air pollution, the bottom line there, has come down by 70% since 1970 in a time when GDP has increased by 250%. This absolutely puts the lie to the political proposition that the control of pollution will kill jobs and stifle the economy. It's just one more alternative truth that's not an alternative truth at all, but just a lie. The only bad news in this graph, and it's very important to point out, is that CO2 production has gone up almost as rapidly as GDP. And that makes the point that simply controlling pollution without thinking about the control of greenhouse gases is dealing with only a piece of the problem and not a satisfactory answer. This is my last substantial slide, and it just shows graphically how badly pollution is neglected in the international development and the global health agendas. The left panel is a recap of the earlier slide showing the number of deaths from pollution, and the right-hand side shows the resources that go to pollution control. Not a nickel should be taken away from the control of AIDS, TB, or malaria. I'm absolutely not saying that. But I think it's shameful that something that kills 9 million people per year is getting pennies on the dollar. So our commission ended with recommendations. I'll just mention the two main ones. First of all, that there be established a new global fund, or at least a funding mechanism for the control of pollution, analogous to Gavi, analogous to the Global Fund. And number two, we recommend that countries around the world need to have basic environmental monitoring systems. We can use satellite monitoring up to a point. It works pretty well for air pollution, but it doesn't track water pollution, and it certainly doesn't track chemical pollution. We need monitoring on the ground if we're going to understand patterns of exposure, patterns of disease, and then be able to design strategies for pollution control and disease prevention. I thought there was one more slide which I put in, which I didn't get, but I'll skip ahead and I'll show it to you because something went wrong in the projector. It has to do with the fact that every Lancet, be thankful I didn't take you through all these slides. The last point is this. Lancet commissions, as I said at the beginning, are not supposed to end with the production of a report, have a drink, go home, and thank our friends. They're supposed to provide, as Richard Horton has told us, for an afterlife. Having grown up with the Jesuits, I wasn't quite sure what that meant, but he explained to me that it's a plan for what we do after the commission itself closes down. And so we've taken a cue from the Planetary Health Alliance, we've taken a clue from the climate change people, from Nick Watts and his team, whom you'll be hearing from this afternoon, and we plan to put together something that we're tentatively calling the Global Pollution and Health Observatory, whose function will be to track pollution and pollution control and pollution-related disease and investment against pollution countries around the world over the coming years, and to follow the scorecard format to see what is being done to deal with pollution. Data, especially in this terrible political time of ours, data that speak truth to power are terribly important, and that's what our goal will be going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. And thank you to Jen and Sarah and Phil for those extraordinary tasters that we have now, those pointers of what is happening and where we can take things. We've time for some questions, about 15 minutes or so, 10, 15 minutes. So, and there are microphones here. So if you want to ask a question, can you come up to the microphones and just say who you are? And if you can keep the question really pointed and clear to the question and to the speaker. I can't believe there's nobody wants to ask oh, we have. Thank you so much. So give your name and where you're from, and then the short, sharp question.
Sure. I'm going to be difficult because I actually have two short, sharp questions.
Good.
I'm Sam Sellers from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. First question's for Amalia. I've seen a lot of people in the auditorium pull out their smartphones because of the excellent slides we've had and are trying to take pictures. Are these slides going to be archived so we don't have to waste our batteries taking pictures? Okay, that would be fantastic if that could happen. Second question for Sarah. I'm wondering to what extent the knowledge platform that you're building for planetary health is going to be linked to existing knowledge platforms that we've already got in some of the related fields. I'm most familiar with the K4Health platform in global health, but I'm sure there are other kinds of knowledge platforms that exist in conservation, for example. To what extent are you trying to link this new planetary health platform with some of those existing knowledge platforms?
Great, thank you for that question. We definitely are, point blank. I think part of this effort is to provide the platform, right? And we need you all to engage with it to let us know where those linkages exist so that we can connect out to those existing platforms from one place. So the beta site that, if you go to our website, you'll be able to see now, has examples of content just to show you a potential structure that this site could have. But we actively welcome any suggestions or links or content that you already have or platforms that you know of that we can provide links out to.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the answer. That is a call to action. So we appreciate that. What I'm going to do now is take a question from here. If you can give your name and where you're from in the question.
Thank you. My name is Frank Bozeman, and I'm actually about to be a student at your school in the MPH program this fall. My question is for Dr. Landrigan. I can't think of a better person to ask this question of. You talked about the rise in IQ points over the last century as a result of getting let out. And something that I've been wondering lately, and you really brought it home for me, is it possible that we are erasing some of those gains through glyphosates, which have been sort of skyrocketing over the last 20 years?
Yeah, glyphosates, for those who don't know them, are the world's most widely used herbicide, marketed as the name of Roundup, very heavily used on GMO crops, and rates of use have increased in this country 240% in the last 2 decades. I honestly don't know if glyphosate is eroding children's IQ or not, but let me expand upon your question and tell you what really worries me is the notion that among the many thousands of chemicals that are widely used in American societies around the world, that have never been properly tested, that are well documented to be in people, what other chemicals are there out there in wide use that may be eroding kids' IQ? It might be glyphosate, although I think that's more likely to be a carcinogen than a neurotoxin. But what about some of the organophosphate pesticides? What about brominated flame retardants? What about some of the newer chemicals like the neonicotinoids that have become the world's most widely used class of insecticide, and we know about this much about their human toxicology, which is scandalous. That's the great fear that I have. So thanks for that question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
My name is Jeremy Pivor. Thanks for your presentations. This summer, I'll be starting a joint master's in medical degree program at UC Berkeley and UCSF. And I'm curious to hear from all of you what you think the role of the physician is and health practitioners in this growing field of planetary health, and how that should translate to education within the spheres.
Jen, maybe you can take.
Okay. So I think doctors, nurses, public health scientists, people in all the health professions have a remarkable opportunity to be leaders in planetary health. Physicians, nurses, health professionals have been leaders time and again in calling the world's attention and the attention of the world's leaders to big problems. Think of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. Think of the physicians who've been involved in climate change. One of the things that health professionals are uniquely well able to do is to put a human face on ecological tragedies. People who are looking at graphs showing rising levels of CO2 most people have trouble relating that to their own experience and to the danger it poses to their own families. But when a nurse or a doctor or an epidemiologist gets up on a podium and talks about the impact that increase in CO2 is going to have on the health of children in Miami, or the spread of dengue into Houston, Texas, and puts a human face on it, it's extremely powerful. So I think the bottom line is health professionals can be leaders, health professionals can be policy changers. The big issue right now, the structural problem that we're dealing with, is that the average American medical student gets 6 hours of training, 6 hours, not credit hours, 6 actual hours of training in environmental medicine in the 4 years of medical school. And the consequence is that most are ill-equipped. So curriculum reform is critical.
Okay. Jen, do you want to say anything else?
No, I think that covered it just phenomenally.
Can I add in one piece to that?
Sarah?
I was just going to say, as you move into medical school and as your colleagues and classmates enter into that space, remember the things that you hear over the next 48 hours, because you have the capacity to exit the silo that you will be put in because of the structures that exist.
Thank you for that. That's so important. Can I take your question?
Hi, I'm Somshekhar Nimbarkar. I'm from India and I'm a pediatrician, so good to have a pediatrician in front. My question is very clear. Many of the changes that we want to make are not listened to by politicians because the effects are not immediate, like what you talked about lead 20 years later on. I can't tell about anything which I want to make right now. So does the training that we envisage in the next few years in our academic curriculum, how can we show that for a change that we make, this is the amount of money that we are going to save in the next 10, 20 years, or this is the amount of health or IQ that is going to change? Because politicians won't respond to anything other than votes or money. So we need to, do we have the training or do we have the capacity to show money changes over a period of time for any intervention that we want to make?
It's a really great question, and I think it's one of the things, is that on? One of the things that I find so interesting about this emerging field is that none of us need to be the experts in everything, and really what we're being charged to do is to try to bring the right partners to the table to help us have collective inquiry and collectively try to find what those answers are. So I would encourage you to take the questions and the observations that you have and the data that you are able to generate from the patients that you're working with or the trends that you're seeing, and engage with economists and engage with policymakers and understand how you can apply the models to current data, but also the observations that you're seeing to make those business cases.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Can I ask the both of you to maybe ask your questions together? Is that okay?
Yep. Iklanete. My name is Ariel Tsaekwe Deranger. I'm from the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation in Northern Alberta, Canada. And so my question is there's a lot of focus on institutions and planetary health, but what I'm seeing missing is Indigenous knowledge systems, which have been linked as critical to developing climate change solutions within the Paris Accord and very well documented within the international community. But I don't see a lot of that being translated into the focus of academic institutions and policy making, particularly in places like North America. We're seeing it being adopted in sort of places with third world countries where there's sort of developing democracies and systems, but in already developed nations like North America, we're not seeing that integration of Indigenous people's knowledge into systems like planetary health and policy making. And is there any movements within your sort of fields to look at ways of integrating Indigenous peoples and Indigenous knowledge systems?
Okay, thank you. And shall I just have the next question, and then we'll get, it's a great question. Just yourself, that's great.
Hi, my name is Federico Andrade. I'm from Colombia, and I just have a small concern. I was looking at the map, and I didn't see like many universities in the Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America. And maybe this is related also with the educational tools. So I was wondering like which universities maybe you are contacting or who is getting involved, and maybe thinking about translating these courses into Spanish. And I'm pretty sure like people here will be keen to help on those kind of things. That's
great. Okay, so the first question, thank you.
I can comment on that. Right, so in response to the question about the need for Indigenous knowledge, I think that that's a really important piece of this. And it's not just Indigenous knowledge, right? There are a whole group of other topic areas that have been, I don't want to use the word excluded, it seems quite strong, but perhaps excluded is the right word. And I think we have the opportunity now to bring those in. But it's a matter of finding the partners, and as Jen said so nicely, bringing them to the table so that we can sit down and talk and figure out, okay, how might you teach this? How can we convey this in a culturally sensitive manner and really bring this to this next generation of scholars? So I would love to have a conversation with you after this about exactly how we move forward in that space.
Thank you. And the Spanish?
Oh,
sorry,
yeah,
go
okay.
ahead.
Yeah, I can talk on that other one if you want. Okay.
Great, yeah, I have a response
So
as well.
thank you very much for the question from Colombia. So I would say the situation in Latin America, I've worked a lot there, especially through the World Health Organization network of collaborating centers, is that the tinder is in place, but it needs a spark. There are people doing children's environmental health. There's been a great growth in Latin America in the last decade in epidemiologic capacity. I'm thinking of the Instituto Nacional de Salud Pública in Mexico, the institutions in Brazil in particular, Chile. It's all the pieces are there. It just needs to be ignited, and we should talk about how to do that.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we've got ideally 3 more really short questions because I'd love to include you. Is it okay just to ask them quite short and then we'll have some answers and then we'll wrap up this session? So if you can have the 3 together as well, is that okay? So Go ahead first.
Hi, Joanne Linden-Mayer. I'm the chair of the board of directors of the One Health Commission. And Dr. Landrigan especially, I know you spoke about health professionals. Clearly, veterinarians are health professionals as well. And I'd be interested in your thoughts about what is the role of veterinarians who are primarily concerned with animal health in a public health, planetary health field.
Okay, that's a very good question.
You know, veterinary physicians have I've worked with veterinarians since I joined CDC in 1970 and know full well the extraordinary contributions that veterinarians make to the to planetary health. And one of the important roles, one among many, is that vets are often the first to recognize new infections, and veterinarians play a critical role in the recognition of new diseases, in the tracing and understanding and the elucidation of the life cycles of various organisms. And as we realize more and more the importance of various animal reservoirs as disease for humans, and then finally, of course, there's the critical importance of protecting livestock animals, which are the source of food for so many people around the world. So there's lots of intersections. Excuse me for not having specifically mentioned veterinarians. We all have our disciplinary prejudices.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you.
Hi. My name is John Hutzhalek, and I'm the Director for Conservation International in Suriname. And in my country, there's tens of thousands of small-scale gold miners using mercury when they look for gold in the forest. And then they bring the gold that's full of mercury to town, where it's then burnt at a number of locations surrounding schools, surrounding hospitals. And I fear that the mercury vapor that's being released is probably going to have a long-term impact on the people there, because it's people just walking by, and the installations that are there to kind of suck off the vapors are not adequate. I've seen some initial research proving that. So for the past 2 years, I've been trying to find scientific and financial resources to actually do that study. Is there anywhere you can point me to where I can go to get the kind of help I think we need?
Yeah. So it's more than 50 years ago now that methylmercury poisoning was first recognized in Minamata, Japan, and was first, like so many forms of environmental toxicity, was first recognized as an acute high-dose exposure, and then subsequently we learned that there was a broad underbelly of mercury toxicity that affects millions of children around the world. Today, artisanal and small-scale gold mining is the single largest source of mercury emissions to the environment. It even eclipses coal burning, surprisingly, but it does. It's very specifically mentioned in the Minamata Convention on Mercury. In the report, in the Commission report on pollution and health, there's a whole big section on artisanal and small-scale gold mining. It talks about the direct effects of the elemental mercury poisoning in the miners and their families who are exposed to the vapor of mercury when they boil the stuff off during the smelting process. There's also the downstream effect of the mercury that gets into the rivers and then turns into methyl mercury and contaminates the fish. The people that I think have done the best work and who contributed that piece of the Commission report are Stefan Bose-O'Reilly and his team at the University of Munich in Germany.
Okay. Thank you, Phil, for that. And maybe you could get together afterwards as well to have further conversations. Now, last but obviously not least, we look forward to your question.
So, Wendy Bennett, I'm wearing a couple of hats here. I'm a trustee with the Nature Conservancy, and I'm also very involved in some work on non-communicable diseases and a Lancet commission on that, so we can talk afterwards. But my one is first a plea that several of the opening comments were read, which was fabulous, which means that you wrote them down. So I'm hoping that in addition to putting the slides up so they're available, we might be able to get some of the papers as well, because it really synthesized a huge amount of information in a very coherent and cogent way and very moving way. So thank you for that. I'm wondering if anybody, and hoping the Rockefeller Foundation might be doing this, is convening some of the funders around this, because often they are thought leaders, and they're the ones that we need to have to get this movement off the ground. And I would hope that we could reach out fairly broadly in that, not only funders who are funding academic institutions where a lot of the intellectual work happens, but also on the public affairs side, the policy changing, because unfortunately, as we all know in the room, this discipline is one that has to move ahead really fast. So we need to be talking publicly through policy organizations as well as academic ones. Sorry. Let's do what we can to bring more environmental organizations into this conversation, because this is how you are the answer to the environmental organizations movement that we've been trying to build for many decades, and we're just coming to the table in many ways. So I hope that we can, among funding communities and others, really make that partnership happen much more closely.
Thank you for those comments. Michael, I don't know whether you want to say anything just now or maybe later in the day. What would you prefer? When talking about funding, it's quite good to...
So I'm glad you raised about funders coming together. We're trying, and it's going to be maybe a bit of a slow process, but about 3 weeks ago, a number of the funders from climate community and from the health community got together in Chicago. And there's an existing climate funders collaborative that many of you may know about. So we're now having the health people raid the party, and so that we figure out ways of working together. I mean, the Wellcome Trust was represented in that meeting, as well as the Rockefeller Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson, and others. So there was a first meeting. Hopefully something more can come of it, but you're right that this is an urgent need in this space to collaborate on the funding front.
Okay, thank you so much. So those were the beginning of the building blocks. The whole today and tomorrow, you're going to capture building blocks and put them together so that we go forward. So my task now is to thank the three speakers and to say, I'm going to wrap up only with the words of a poem by T.S. Eliot, just some lines of T.S. Eliot's poem, because I think they capture something that we have said, and some of the questions have hinted at, that actually it's going back to the beginnings, it's going back to the moral imperative, it's going back to the sacred texts, it's going back to what we knew thousands of years ago, bringing that together again. And T.S. Eliot said, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." And I think today we're beginning to do that again. So take the history we have, the Indigenous communities, the history we have from the evidence, from the commissions, from the universities, from the tools that we have as well, and bring those together. So join with me in thanking these three excellent panellists. Thank you.